It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
There's something extraordinarily powerful about going through that and helping the kids to have that experience, to mourn and to grieve, to understand the impermanence of life.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
Well, this is going to be an unexpectedly difficult podcast to work our way through. My name's Justin Coulson. I'm here with Kylie, my wife. We're parents of 6 daughters. And today we were going to be talking about a really funny conversation that Kylie had just last week with her sister, who rang to say, I'm thinking about getting a dog. And Kylie spent how long telling her not to get a dog?
Well, she was actually she was in the car and she was driving to the place to pick up a dog.
She had the kids in the car. They were going to get the dog and you made her turn around and not get the dog.
Well, by the time I'd finished with her, I'd done a pretty good job at convincing her that this was not a good decision. And I still stand beside that conversation.
Dogs are a pain, right? They're noisy and you've got to pick up after them and they cost money and they sleep on the couch and they leave hair everywhere. And
they bark. And if your neighbours aren't particularly kind, then you have all kinds of neighbourly disputes.
And so that was the conversation we were going to have. And like you said, you stand by those arguments against a dog, even though we have a dog or had a dog. Because on Friday, you took our dog to the vet and he's had a tumour growing for a while. And the vet pretty much said, I don't think you should take the dog home. I need to take care of him here now and he's not going to come back home. And so then you had to make a decision. Do I take the dog home or do I leave him here? And so you brought him home. And for the next couple of hours, our family spent our final goodbyes with Benson before we took him to the vet on Friday night. So this podcast is about saying goodbye to a dog. And it's probably going to be a bit hard for us to get through. And it might not be very long because it hurt. And it's so funny because dogs are a pain, right? For all the reasons.
I didn't even want a dog. More than a decade ago, I got ambushed one long weekend because the RSPCA was having a half-price sale. They were inundated with animals and my mother-in-law said, let's just go and have a look. Whoever goes and has a look and doesn't come home with a dog, I knew that I'd lost the
argument.
I'd lost the argument from the moment I got into that car. There was no way we were coming home without a dog. But, I made it really clear that if we were going to get a dog, knowing that I had lost the argument from the beginning, that I would choose the dog. And I've stood by the fact that I chose Benson all those years ago. But I think the reality is he chose us.
Just the most beautiful dog. We had this black lab with the most perfect temperament and the most delightful, fun way of being. And we would love to tell you about Benson and all the memories that we have, but that's not really the purpose of this podcast because ultimately this is a podcast for a time-poor parent who wants answers. And I guess there's some questions to answer, questions about whether you should have a dog, whether all the drama and the pain of having the dog is worth it, and what we can do to help our children to get through the loss of a pet. So what I thought we'd do in this conversation is we'll share a little bit about what happened that afternoon and what we did with our kids to help them to get through the evening and the weekend and everything associated with it. So we went down to the vet at around about 5:30 on Friday night. The vet had said, I'm closing up, but you can come in and you can be my last person in the clinic. That way it'll be quiet and you'll have the place to yourself. So you brought him home from the vet. The kids came home and they spent as much time as they could giving him treats and giving him all sorts of love. We told them immediately exactly what was going to be happening.
It was amazing. Through that process I watched, Benson had really taken a turn for the worse within that last 24 hours and he was just on his bed and wasn't going anywhere. And one by one, the girls kind of retreated to their rooms and had their little cries on their own. And then they just would come out at different points and spend, some one-on-one time with him. And it was just beautiful to watch as they said their own little goodbyes to him. And I loved how there was just so much respect for each person and allowing them the time that they needed. No one kind of crowded in or took over. It was just one-on-one time, and everybody seemed to just understand and know that that was an important part of the process for them.
I didn't talk to the girls about it, but we decided that we weren't going to have him cremated. So I went into the yard with a shovel and I dug a hole as deep as I could. And then we put him in the car at 5:30. We went down to the vet's, and the vet was so good. They lit a candle out in the front office, which basically said if there's a candle burning, someone's saying goodbye to a pet. They sat with us. We put Benson on his blanket. They gave him a catheter and then put a muscle relaxant into the catheter. And he just laid there for a couple of minutes, really peaceful, really, really relaxed. And I felt like we were so sad. We were doing okay though, until that moment when Emily, our 7-year-old, she had decided at the last minute that she didn't want to be in the room. And then she changed her mind once she was out in the foyer on her own. And she came back into the room and saw Benson laying there, and just in this big, tearful outburst, she said, "Goodbye, Benson." And I gave her this great big hug, and boy, it was tough. It was just so tough. And then the vet obviously gave him the final injection, and about 30 seconds later, he put his stethoscope on Benson's chest and said, "He's gone." And so we wrapped him up in that blanket of his and put him back into the car and brought him home. And we stood around this little grave that I dug in the backyard and had a little funeral service for our dog. It didn't take too long. Well, it took a little while because there's a lot of us, but we just shared our favourite memories of Benson. And then
little Emily just gets us every time. When it was her turn, she was so articulate as she expressed how she was feeling. She just said, "I feel like something's broken inside me and I don't know if it will ever get fixed." And I think that's how we all felt, or are feeling a little bit at the moment.
Which is so funny because
I didn't want a dog.
You never wanted a dog.
I didn't want a dog. But, even just, walking down the hallway to hang the washing out in the laundry, Benson would always follow me. And because we've got floorboards, I could just hear his little feet pitter-patter. And the other day when I went to hang the washing, it was just quiet. He's waiting at the gate when we drive in the driveway. He sits under the table.
I'm so used to him meeting me as I get out of the car and walking up the stairs with me and into the house. And so this week we're saying goodbye to our dog of a little over 10 years, that rescue dog that you didn't really want, and that dog who has frankly and honestly driven me crazy. I've been so cranky. Stop barking, stop upsetting the neighbours, stop escaping from our yard and making everyone on Facebook talk about that dog that's escaped again. And yet here we are. So in terms of the conversation that we want to share with you, well, first of all, we wanted to share with you what we've experienced over the weekend because so many families go through it. But I guess it kind of prompts that conversation, doesn't it? Is it a good idea or a bad idea to have a dog? You've had that conversation with your sister and said, don't do it. You're crazy. Dogs are a pain. Dogs are annoying. You don't want to do this to yourself. And yet there's something about the fact that we've lost Benson and said goodbye to him. And I am just so grateful for the discomfort. I'm so grateful for the sadness. I'm so grateful for the pain and sorrow that we felt. There's something extraordinarily powerful about going through that and helping the kids to have that experience, to mourn and to grieve, and to understand the impermanence of life.
I still stand by the list I gave my sister.
Dogs are a pain. It's true. They are a pain. I agree too. And yet,
but a friend, after she found out about Benson, she sent me a little Facebook article that she has obviously found, and she just said, if a dog was a teacher, you would learn things like, when your loved one comes home, always run to greet them. Never pass up the opportunity to go for a joyride. Allow the experience of fresh air and the wind in your face to be pure ecstasy. Take naps, stretch before rising, run, romp and play daily. Thrive on attention and let people touch you. Avoid biting when a simple growl will do. On warm days, stop to lie on your back on the grass. On hot days, drink lots of water and lie under a shady tree. When you're happy, dance around and wake your entire body. Delight in the simple joy of a long walk. Be faithful. Never pretend to be something you're not. If what you want lies buried, dig until you find it. I love that one. When somebody's having a bad day, just be silent and sit close by and nuzzle them gently. That's the secret of happiness that we can learn from a good dog.
Yeah, that sounds like our Benson. So the take-home message from this slightly different podcast, we've normally got a lot of energy. We're normally excited to share positive ideas about making your family happy. The take-home message, I think, is whether you get a dog or not is really up to you, or a pet of any kind. We can't tell you whether that's a good or a bad idea, even though you told your sister that it was a bad idea. But if you can, I think you should. Because what we've felt over these last few days as we've farewelled our beautiful dog makes me feel so alive. It makes me feel so grateful for life. And those memories, like the day that he stole about a dozen steaks off the side of the barbecue before I had time to cook them for the dinner that we were having people come over for. Boy, oh boy. You okay?
I think the reality is when you can feel such deep loss, it's just an acknowledgement that you've loved so deeply. And if I could go back and have that conversation with my sister,
you'd still tell her not to get the Kelpie, wouldn't you?
I still would tell her not to get the Kelpie.
Maybe a smaller dog that's less active.
But I probably would encourage her to find the right dog that their family could love. Because there's just something so beautiful about having had Benson in our lives that I would never want to miss out on.
I think it's going to be a little while before we get another dog. We need to take our time with that. And I know that you don't think we'll ever get another one, but I've just got this feeling, it's just a bit of an inkling that we might possibly end up grieving the loss of another dog one day, because they really are man's best friend. We really hope that you've enjoyed the podcast. Like I said, a bit of a different one today. We hope that it helps to make your family appreciate what you have or think seriously about what life offers. And we hope that the tips, as simple as they are, can help you if you ever go through something like that with a pet of your own or a loved one of your own when grief and loss come into your life. As always, the Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. And if you'd like more ideas about making your family happy, you can find them at happyfamilies.com.au. Goodbye, Benson.